The chamber was vast enough to hold representatives from 47 different species, and today every seat was filled. Commander Sarah Chen stood in the center of the circular room, surrounded by beings that looked nothing like her. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few were made of what looked like living crystal. Above her head, holographic displays showed images of death and destruction. Burning cities, bodies in the streets, children crying over their parents. Sarah wanted to look away, but she forced herself to watch. These images were the reason humanity stood trial today. 3,472,000,000 lives. The Vrex ambassador said. His voice was cold and sharp, like ice breaking. The Vrex looked like massive insects, with 4 arms and compound eyes that caught every tiny movement. That is the cost of humanity's crime. 3 worlds, entire populations, gone. Sarah took a deep breath. We didn't do this. Humanity would never. Silence. The voice came from the council chair. A being called the Eternal Speaker. No one knew what species it belonged to. It wore flowing robes that hid everything except 2 glowing eyes. You will speak only when given permission. Sarah's hands trembled with anger, but she pressed her lips together and said nothing. The Eternal Speaker gestured, and new images appeared. These showed human ships near the affected worlds. They showed containers being transported. They showed what looked like human scientists working with biological materials. The evidence is clear, said Ambassador Theclon of the Kethric Empire. The Kethric were tall and thin, with skin that shimmered like oil on water. They were one of the most powerful species in the galaxy, and their opinion carried enormous weight. Humanity developed a biological weapon. They deployed it against the Vrex colonies. The genetic markers are undeniably human in origin. Let us examine that evidence, Sarah said quickly. Our scientists need to see the data. We need to run our own tests. Anyone can fake genetic markers, if they... Are you suggesting the Vrex fabricated evidence of their own people's deaths? No, I'm saying someone else might have done this and made it look like us. Sarah's voice rose despite her best efforts to stay calm. Why would we attack the Vrex? We have treaties with them. We have trade agreements. We have nothing to gain from this. You have everything to gain, the Vrex ambassador said. Our colonies were rich in rare minerals. Minerals that humanity has been desperately seeking for their expansion projects. That's not true, we can prove. Enough. The Eternal Speaker stood, and the entire chamber fell silent. This council has reviewed all evidence. We have heard testimony from survivors. We have examined the biological weapon's genetic structure. All findings point to humanity. Sarah felt her heart sink. She looked around the chamber, searching for friendly faces. The Deltharian representative, who had always been kind to humans, wouldn't meet her eyes. The Zolari, who humanity had helped during a famine, looked away. Even the smaller species who usually supported Earth were silent. The vote will now commence, the Eternal Speaker announced. All in favor of finding humanity guilty of genocide and crimes against the galactic community? Lights began appearing around the chamber. Blue lights meant guilty. Red lights meant innocent. Sarah watched as blue light after blue light flickered on. The Kethric voted blue immediately. The Vrex, of course, voted blue. But so did the Deltharians. So did the Zolari. Species after species voted against humanity. When the count finished, 43 species had voted guilty. Only 4 had voted innocent. And those were tiny species, with almost no power in the council. The verdict is decided, the Eternal Speaker said. Humanity is found guilty of genocide. The sentence is immediate expulsion from the Galactic Council and complete isolation. All jump gates leading to human space will be closed. All trade agreements are cancelled. All diplomatic relations are severed. Humanity will be confined to their home system and their existing colonies. Any attempt to leave this quarantine zone will be considered an act of war and will be met with total military force. Sarah felt like she was falling. The chamber seemed to spin around her. You can't do this. You're sentencing billions of humans to isolation. Our colonies depend on trade. Our people depend on the jump gates. We'll be cut off from everything. You should have considered that before committing genocide, the Vrex ambassador said coldly. We didn't do it, Sarah shouted. Her military training abandoned her, and raw emotion took over. Someone is framing us. Can't you see that? Someone wanted humanity removed from the council, and you're all playing right into their hands. The Eternal Speaker gestured, and 2 security officers appeared beside Sarah. They were Kryn, a species that looked like walking armored tanks. Each one was twice Sarah's size. Remove her, the Eternal Speaker commanded. The Kryn grabbed Sarah's arms. She didn't resist. What would be the point? She had no weapons, no support, no hope. As they dragged her toward the exit, she turned her head back toward the chamber. You'll regret this, she called out. When you find out the truth, when you realize what you've done, you'll regret this. No one answered. The representatives were already standing, already leaving, already putting humanity behind them, like a bad memory. The Kryn pulled Sarah through corridors that had once felt welcoming but now seemed like a prison. Other species passed them, and some pointed at Sarah. Some whispered. Some laughed. The human who thought her people could sit among the great powers of the galaxy. The human whose species had committed the ultimate crime. They brought her to the docking bay where the human diplomatic ship waited. The rest of Earth's delegation was already there, all of them looking shocked and broken. Ambassador Williams, who had led humanity's council efforts for 20 years, looked like he had aged a decade in the last hour. Sarah, he said quietly, they did it. They actually did it. We need to get word to Earth, Sarah said. Already done, Ambassador Williams said. But there are 15 human ships currently using the gate network. They won't make it home before the shutdown. Sarah closed her eyes. 15 ships, thousands of people, stranded in hostile territory. The Kryn pushed her toward the boarding ramp of the human ship. She climbed aboard, and the rest of the delegation followed. The ship's captain, a woman named Rodriguez, was already at the controls. Strap in, Rodriguez said. They're giving us a 30-minute window to get out of council space. After that, they'll fire on sight. The ship launched. Sarah strapped herself into a seat and stared out the window. Below them, the council station grew smaller. It was a massive structure, a symbol of cooperation between species, of unity in the face of a vast and dangerous universe. Humanity had been so proud to join that station. They had worked so hard to prove themselves worthy, and now they were being thrown out like garbage. Captain Rodriguez, Sarah said. Can you access the data networks? I need to see the evidence files one more time. Rodriguez shook her head. They've already locked us out. We can't access anything. Sarah slammed her fist against the armrest. Of course they did. Can't let us see the truth. Can't let us prove our innocence. Ambassador Williams moved to sit beside her. Sarah, I know you're angry. We all are. But we need to think about what comes next. Earth needs to prepare for isolation. Our colonies need supplies. Our people need hope. Hope? Sarah laughed. But there was no humor in it. What hope? We've been branded as genocidal monsters. The entire galaxy thinks we murdered 3 billion people. How do we come back from that? I don't know, Williams admitted. But we have to try. The ship accelerated, heading toward the nearest jump gate that would take them back to human space. As they traveled, reports started coming in. Human ships were being denied docking rights at stations throughout the galaxy. Human traders were being arrested on suspicion of carrying biological weapons. Human tourists were being rounded up and deported. And then came the worst news. One of the 15 stranded human ships had been destroyed. The captain had refused to surrender to Vrex authorities, and they had opened fire. 300 people dead. Sarah felt tears on her face but didn't bother to wipe them away. This was really happening. Humanity was being cast out. They reached the jump gate, and Rodriguez entered the coordinates for Earth. The gate activated, forming a swirling vortex of blue energy. The ship entered, and space twisted around them. For a moment, Sarah felt like she was being stretched across the universe. Then, they emerged on the other side. Earth, home. The blue and green planet hung in space ahead of them, beautiful and fragile. Earth control is hailing us, Rodriguez said. Put them through, Williams ordered. A face appeared on the screen. Admiral Thompson, head of Earth Defense Fleet. He looked grim. Ambassador Williams, we've been monitoring the Council broadcasts. Is it true? Are we expelled? It's true, Williams said. And it's worse than that. They're closing all jump gates to human space. Any human ship that tries to leave will be fired upon. We're being quarantined. Thompson's face went pale. Our colony ships. We have 3 vessels heading to new worlds. They won't have enough supplies to turn back. Then they'll have to settle without support, Williams said. Admiral, we need you to recall every human ship that's outside the quarantine zone. Bring everyone home. And then we need to prepare for a long isolation. How long? Williams looked at Sarah, then back at the screen. Sarah spoke up. Admiral, I need access to our intelligence networks. I managed to grab a data fragment before they locked us out of Council systems. It's not much, but it might be a lead. What kind of lead? Thompson asked. The kind that points to the Kethric, Sarah said. I think they're behind this. I think they framed us. Thompson was quiet for a moment. That's a serious accusation. The Kethric are one of the most powerful species in the galaxy, which makes them the perfect culprits, Sarah said. They have the resources to fake evidence. They have the motive. They've been pushing for greater control of the Council for years, and humanity was always voting against their proposals. Even if you're right, what can we do about it? Thompson asked. We're being isolated. We have no allies. The entire galaxy believes we're guilty. Sarah stared at Earth, hanging peaceful in space. Her home. Humanity's home. They had reached so far, accomplished so much, only to have it all ripped away by lies. Then we prove them wrong, she said quietly. However long it takes, whatever we have to do, we prove them wrong. The ship continued toward Earth. Behind them, across the galaxy, jump gates were shutting down one by one. The pathways to human space were closing. Humanity was being locked away from the rest of the galaxy. But Sarah made herself a promise. Someday, somehow, they would return. And when they did, the galaxy would learn the truth. Even if it took 100 years, even if it took 1,000, humanity would return. President Marcus Webb stood at the podium, looking out at the cameras that would broadcast his speech to every corner of Earth and to all the human colonies. Behind him, the flags of Earth's nations hung in a row. Before him, the weight of billions of people's hopes and fears pressed down like a physical force. It had been 3 months since the exile. 3 months since the galaxy turned its back on humanity. In that time, the situation had grown worse. The jump gates were sealed. Trade had stopped. Colonies were rationing food. Panic was spreading. Webb cleared his throat. The cameras focused on his face. My fellow humans, he began. I won't lie to you. We face the darkest moment in our species' history. We have been cast out by the galaxy. We have been labeled as monsters. Our name has been dragged through the mud, and the truth doesn't seem to matter. He paused, letting the words sink in. In living rooms across Earth, people watched. On colony ships between the stars, crews gathered around screens. On Mars, in the lunar cities, in the orbital habitats, humanity listened. They wanted us gone, Webb continued. His voice grew stronger. They wanted us isolated and broken. They wanted us to fade away into history as a cautionary tale. But I stand before you today to tell you this. We will not fade. We will not break. We will not let them win. He gripped the podium. Starting today, Earth and all human colonies are entering a new phase. We call it the Silent Initiative. For as long as it takes, we will go dark. We will cut off all contact with the galactic community. We will focus entirely on our own survival and growth. On Mars, Governor Chen Li watched the speech with her advisors. Is he serious? One of them asked. We're going to just hide. Listen, Chen said quietly. Webb was still speaking. But make no mistake, we're not hiding, we're building. Every scientist, every engineer, every person with an idea, we need you now. The rules that the galaxy imposed on us, the restrictions on certain technologies, those don't apply anymore. We're on our own, which means we're free. In a research laboratory on Europa, Dr. Sarah Martinez stopped her work to watch. She was a geneticist, one of hundreds who had been forced to abandon promising research because the Galactic Council said it was too dangerous. Free to pursue quantum entanglement communication without restrictions, Webb said. Free to develop faster-than-light travel that doesn't depend on their jump gates. Free to enhance ourselves. To build machines that think. To push the boundaries of what's possible. Martinez felt a chill run down her spine. Was he saying what she thought he was saying? We have resources. Webb continued. We have brilliant minds. What we don't have is time to waste or energy to spend on despair. So, here's what we're going to do. He counted on his fingers. First, all colonies will become self-sufficient within 5 years. No exceptions. If you need help, ask. We'll send it. But every human settlement must be able to survive without supply ships. Second, we're going to build shipyards, research stations, manufacturing centers. We're going to create an infrastructure that doesn't depend on galactic technology. Third, we're going to explore. There are thousands of systems beyond the quarantine zone that the galaxy hasn't surveyed. We're going to find them. We're going to settle them. And we're going to do it without anyone knowing. Governor Chen sat forward. Secret colonies? Is that even possible? Webb's image on the screen seemed to look directly at her. Fourth, we're going to learn everything we can about the species that cast us out. Their weaknesses, their technologies, their politics. And finally, Webb said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper, we're going to make them regret what they did. Not through revenge, not through violence, but by becoming something they never expected. Something they never imagined possible. He straightened. They cast humanity out, thinking we were weak, thinking we were guilty, thinking we would crumble. Let's prove them wrong on all counts. The speech ended. For a moment, there was silence. Then, across Earth, across every colony, across every human ship and station, people started to react. Some cheered. Some cried. Some sat in stunned silence. But everyone understood. Humanity wasn't giving up. Humanity was just getting started. 10 years passed. On Earth, the massive solar arrays that had been rejected by the Council as too ambitious were now complete. They provided more power than the entire planet needed. The excess energy fed into research projects that worked around the clock. Dr. Martinez had made a breakthrough in genetic enhancement. Humans could now live longer, heal faster, resist diseases that had plagued them for centuries. The Council had forbidden such research, calling it unethical. But there was no Council anymore to tell humans what they could or couldn't do with their own bodies. 20 years passed. The first quantum communication network went online. It didn't use jump gates. It didn't use any galactic technology at all. Human ships could now talk to each other instantly, across any distance. The galaxy had nothing like it. Commander James Okafor, only 10 years old when the exile happened, graduated from the new Naval Academy. The ships he learned to pilot were sleeker than old human vessels, faster, tougher, built with technologies that humanity had developed in isolation. "How does it feel?" his instructor asked after his first solo flight. James grinned. "Like freedom." 40 years passed. The first seed ship slipped past the quarantine zone while the galaxy wasn't watching. It was small, automated, almost invisible to sensors. It carried everything needed to start a colony. Frozen embryos, construction machines, databases full of knowledge. It traveled to a system so far from galactic civilization that no species had ever surveyed it. It found a world with water and an atmosphere. The machines activated. They began to build. 6 months later, a second seed ship launched. Then a third. Then 10 at once. The silent network was born. Sarah Chen, now an admiral, oversaw the expansion from a hidden command center in the Kuiper Belt. She was older now. Her hair gray, but her eyes still burned with the same determination from that terrible day in the council chambers. "How many colonies do we have?" asked her second in command. 15, Sarah said, and another 30 seed ships en route to new systems. "The galaxy thinks we're trapped. They have no idea we're spreading. What if they find out?" Sarah smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. By the time they find out, it'll be too late. 60 years passed. Human ships that didn't look like human ships slipped through galactic space. They observed. They listened. They recorded everything. In the Kethric Empire, there were whispers of unrest. The colonies that had supposedly been hit by human bioweapons were thriving under Kethric control. Strange. That, almost like the Kethric had wanted those worlds for themselves. A human spy, genetically modified to look like a Vrex, infiltrated the Vrex military archives. What she found there was damning. Communications that suggested the Vrex had known the bioweapon wasn't human-made. Evidence that they had been paid to blame humanity anyway. The pieces of the conspiracy were coming together. Slowly, carefully. 100 years passed. President Lin, Marcus Webb's great-granddaughter, stood in the same place her ancestor had stood a century ago. She addressed a humanity that had changed. The average human now lived 200 years, thanks to genetic enhancements. Humans worked alongside AI partners so advanced that philosophers debated whether they were truly alive. Human ships could cross vast distances without jump gates, powered by fusion drives that converted matter directly to energy. "We have survived," President Lin said. "We have thrived. We have spread to 30 worlds that the galaxy doesn't know about. We have technologies they can't imagine. But we're not done." She looked into the camera. "The galaxy still believes we're guilty. Still believes we're locked away. It's time to start changing that belief. Not loudly. Not obviously. But we're going to start leaving traces. Hints. We're going to make them wonder." In the silent network, colony ships celebrated. They had been born after the exile. They had never seen galactic civilization. But they knew the stories. They knew what had been taken from their grandparents. 150 years passed. A Vrex pirate fleet disappeared near the edge of the quarantine zone. No wreckage, no survivors. Just gone. 3 months later, a Kethric scout ship vanished in the same region. 6 months after that, a civilian transport reported seeing strange ships. Ships that didn't match any known design. Ships that moved impossibly fast. The reports were filed and forgotten. Probably just sensor glitches. Probably just pirates attacking each other. But in certain offices, in certain intelligence agencies, people started paying attention. 200 years passed. Sarah Chen was still alive. Barely. At 237 years old, even with genetic enhancement, her body was failing. She lay in a medical bay on a station that orbited a world called New Earth, the first of the secret colonies. Her great-granddaughter, also named Sarah, sat beside her bed. This Sarah wore the uniform of a diplomatic officer. She was young, Brilliant. And ready. Is it time? The elder Sarah asked, her voice weak. The council is weakening, young Sarah said. The Ketheric have taken more power. More species are unhappy. We have all the evidence we need to prove the conspiracy. And our fleet. She smiled. Our fleet is ready. Then go. The elder Sarah said. She reached out and gripped her descendant's hand. Make them see the truth. Make them understand what they threw away. I will. Young Sarah promised. The old woman's eyes closed. She had lived long enough to see humanity transform from a broken species into something magnificent. Long enough to know that the day of return was coming. She never woke up, but she died, smiling. On Earth, in the hidden colonies, in secret shipyards scattered across uncharted space, humanity prepared. They had spent 2 centuries in silence, 2 centuries building and learning and growing. The galaxy had forgotten them, or thought it had, but humanity remembered. Humanity had waited, and now, humanity was ready to remind the galaxy of a simple truth. You couldn't kill humans by casting them out. You could only make them stronger. In the darkness between stars, thousands of human ships began to move. They were silent. They were invisible. They were everywhere and nowhere. The silent network had become a silent empire. And soon, very soon, the galaxy was going to hear from humanity again. In the Galactic Council chambers, the same chamber where humanity had been cast out 2 centuries ago, the Eternal Speaker called a routine session to order. Representatives from all the member species gathered to discuss trade routes and territorial disputes. No one mentioned humanity. Why would they? That was ancient history. But in the shadows of that very chamber, human censors watched. Human intelligence officers listened. And somewhere very far away, young Sarah Chen reviewed her plans. Soon, she whispered to herself. Very soon. Captain Vex Thor of the Vrex Consortium had been hunting pirates for 3 months with nothing to show for it. His ship, the Times Talon of Discovery *, was a science vessel, not a warship. But lately science missions were too dangerous without weapons. Too many ships had gone missing in the outer sectors. He was reviewing sensor data when his second officer, Crix, made a sharp clicking sound that meant surprise. Captain, we have a contact. Bearing 347. Distance approximately 50,000 kilometers. Vex Thor looked up. Identification? Unknown design. Wait. Crix's antennae twitched. Captain, this doesn't match anything in our databases. It's not pirate. It's not any known species. Show me. The main screen displayed an image of the ship. It was sleek and dark, with smooth curves that seemed to flow like water. No visible weapons. But Vex Thor had learned not to trust appearances. The ship was roughly the size of a small cruiser. Try to hail them, Vex Thor ordered. Crix worked the communications panel. Channel open, no response. Keep trying, and charge weapons, just in case. The strange ship continued on its path, not slowing, not changing course. It was heading away from galactic space, toward the old quarantine zone. The old quarantine zone. Vex Thor felt something cold settle in his stomach. Crix, run a deep scan. I want to know everything about that ship. Scanning now. Crix's mandibles clicked as he worked. Captain, this is strange. The hull material is unknown. Energy signature is unlike anything I've seen, and the design. Captain, it's efficient. Very efficient. Whoever built this knew what they were doing. Could it be an unknown species? Possibly. Or... Crix hesitated. There are some elements that remind me of old human designs, but more advanced. Much more advanced. Vex Thor's 4 arms gripped his command chair. Human? That's impossible. Humans were locked away 200 years ago. Their technology was primitive. I'm just saying what the computer suggests, Captain. Vex Thor made a decision. Follow that ship. Keep distance. I want to see where it's going. The Times Talon of Discovery Times adjusted course and began trailing the mysterious vessel. For an hour, nothing happened. The strange ship maintained speed and heading. Then, without warning, it stopped. Captain, the vessel has cut engines. It's just sitting there. Is it damaged? No signs of damage. It's just waiting. Vexthor didn't like this. All weapons ready. Shields to maximum. Then the strange ship turned around. It faced them directly. A communication channel opened without Crix doing anything. A voice spoke in perfect galactic standard. Vrex vessel Times Talon of Discovery *. This is Captain James Okafor of the Earth Defense Fleet ship. Times Quiet Storm *. You've been following us for the last hour. State your intentions. The bridge fell silent. Crix turned all four eyes toward Vexthor. Did he say, Earth? Vexthor's voice was harsh. Human ship, you are in violation of the quarantine zone restrictions. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. There was a pause. Then the human voice came back, and Vexthor could hear amusement in it. Quarantine zone? We left your quarantine zone 150 years ago. You just never noticed. Impossible. The jump gates to human space are sealed. Who said anything about jump gates? On the screen, the human ship hung in space, dark and silent. Vexthor felt his confidence waver. Something was wrong here. Something was very wrong. Human vessel, I am authorized to use force if you do not comply. This is your final warning. Let me be clear about something, the human captain said. And now there was no amusement in his voice. I'm going to give you one chance. Turn your ship around and head back to Vrex space. Forget you saw us. Forget this conversation. Go home. You dare threaten a Vrex military vessel? I'm not threatening. I'm advising. There's a difference. Vexthor had been a captain for 20 years. He had faced down pirates, smugglers, and hostile species. He would not be intimidated by some primitive human in a fancy ship. All weapons open fire. The Times Talon of Discovery Times unleashed its full arsenal. Plasma cannons blazed. Missile tubes launched their payloads. Energy beams lanced across space toward the human ship. The human ship didn't move. The weapons hit. Vexthor expected to see the human vessel break apart. Instead, a shimmering field appeared around it, absorbing every shot. The missiles exploded harmlessly against the shield. The energy beams scattered like light hitting a mirror. What? Crix's voice was barely a whisper. Captain? Their shields just absorbed 90% of our firepower. The other 10% didn't even scratch their hull. Vexthor felt fear for the first time in years. Full power to shields. Evasive maneuvers. The human ship moved. It was so fast that Vexthor's eyes couldn't track it. One moment, it was 50,000 kilometers away. The next moment, it was right beside them. Crix. Fire everything. Captain, weapons aren't responding. They're locked. Something is jamming our systems. On the communication channel, the human captain spoke again. His voice was calm, almost sad. I told you to leave. You didn't listen. You fired on an Earth Defense Fleet vessel. That's an act of war. We were defending galactic territory, Vexthor shouted. No, the human said. You were defending a lie. A lie that was told 200 years ago. But that's over now. Something happened to the Times Talon of Discovery * systems. Panels sparked. Lights flickered. The ship shuddered. Captain! Crix's voice was panicked. They're taking control of our computer core. I can't stop it. Cut power to all systems. I can't. They've locked me out. Vexthor watched helplessly as his ship died around him. Life support stayed active. Emergency lights came on. But everything else went dark. The human captain's voice came through one last time. I'm leaving your life support intact. Send a message to your superiors. Tell them humanity has returned. Tell them we're not the same species you exiled. And tell them that if they fire on us again, we won't be so merciful." The communication channel closed. Through the view screen, Vex Thor watched the human ship move away. It accelerated smoothly, impossibly fast, and then it simply vanished. "Where did it go?" Vex Thor demanded. Crix was working frantically at his station, trying to restore systems. "I don't know. It just disappeared. No jump gate signature. No wormhole. It was just gone. Get communications back online. Now. We need to report this." It took 3 hours to restore enough systems to send a message. When Vex Thor finally connected with Vrex Command, his report was met with silence. "Say that again," the command officer said slowly. "You encountered a human ship?" "This. Yes, sir. It disabled us completely. Their technology is far beyond ours." "That's impossible. Humans were quarantined. They couldn't have." "They did," Vex Thor interrupted. "I saw it with my own eyes. And if that was just one ship, if they have more like it." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The command officer's image on the screen looked shaken. "Stay where you are. We're sending a recovery team." "And Captain? Don't share this information with anyone. That's a direct order." The communication ended. Vex Thor sat in his darkened bridge and thought about the human captain's words. "We left your quarantine zone 150 years ago. You just never noticed. How many human ships were out there? How many secret colonies had they built? What else had they been doing while the galaxy thought them safely locked away?" The recovery team arrived 6 hours later. They towed the Times Talon of Discovery Times back to the nearest Vrex station, where technicians swarmed over it, trying to understand what had been done to its systems. But Vex Thor's report had already started spreading. In intelligence offices across Vrex space, analysts were pulling up old records about humanity. What they found was disturbing. There had been other encounters. Small things, dismissed at the time. Ships disappearing near the old quarantine zone. Strange sensor readings. Reports from remote stations about seeing vessels that didn't match any known design. All of it had been filed away as sensor glitches or pirate activity. But now, looking at it with fresh eyes, a pattern emerged. Humanity hadn't been sitting quietly in their corner of space. They had been moving, growing, building. The galaxy had ignored them for 200 years. That had been a mistake. In the Galactic Council headquarters, emergency meetings were called. The Vrex presented Vex's Thor's report. Representatives from dozens of species listened in growing alarm. "This is clearly exaggerated," said the Kethric ambassador, Theclon. He was old now, but still in power, still influential. One Vrex ship encounters one vessel of unknown origin. And suddenly, we're meant to believe humanity has been expanding in secret? The technology doesn't lie, the Vrex military representative said. "We've analyzed the system's tampering. It's sophisticated beyond anything we have. This wasn't done by primitives. This was. We have a groove too. Then perhaps it's another species. Why assume it's humans?" "Because the captain identified himself as human," the Vrex representative said flatly. "Because the ship's computer core, once we restored it, had traces of human coding language. Because all the evidence points to them." The eternal speaker, the same being who had presided over humanity's exile, spoke up. "If humans have indeed been active outside the quarantine zone, we need to contain them immediately. I propose we send a fleet to the quarantine boundary and enforce it properly." "Enforce it how?" asked the Deltharian representative. "If they can disable our ships with ease, what good will a fleet do?" That question hung in the air, unanswered. On the outskirts of the meeting, a small figure watched and listened. She looked like a junior aide. Someone too unimportant to notice. Her skin had the greenish tint of a Zolari, her eyes the compound structure of an insectoid species. But underneath the genetic camouflage, she was human. She was one of dozens of human spies who had infiltrated galactic institutions over the past century. She recorded everything, storing it in an implant that no scanner could detect. When the meeting ended, she left quietly and headed to a public transportation hub. In a bathroom stall, she activated a quantum communication device hidden in what looked like an ordinary bracelet. "This is Agent Lin," she said quietly. "The Vrex encounter has been reported. The Council is panicking. They're planning a response, but they're divided. Recommendation: proceed to next phase." Light years away, in a hidden command center, Sarah Chen received the message. She smiled. "Send the signal," she told her communications officer. "It's time." Across the galaxy, in a dozen different locations, human ships received the same order. They had been hiding, watching, waiting. Now they stopped hiding. A Kethric trade convoy traveling through a supposedly secure system found themselves surrounded by human vessels. The ships didn't fire. They just appeared, showing themselves clearly, letting the Kethric see them. Then, they vanished. A Council observation post near the quarantine zone went active with alarms as 50 human ships passed by in formation. They were close enough to be seen clearly, far enough to be out of weapon range. They passed by like a parade and continued into deep space. On a frontier world, colonists looked up to see a massive human vessel hanging in orbit. It stayed for exactly 1 hour, visible to everyone. Undeniable. Then it left. The reports flooded into Council headquarters. Human ships, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all over the galaxy, moving freely, ignoring the quarantine, showing themselves deliberately. And with each report came the same message, broadcast on all frequencies. "Humanity has returned. We seek to speak with the Galactic Council. Not as exiles, not as criminals, as equals." The galaxy, which had forgotten humanity, was suddenly forced to remember. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was the largest gathering in 200 years. Every species sent their most senior representatives. The chamber buzzed with dozens of different languages, all translating through the universal communication system. The Eternal Speaker stood at the center podium, looking exactly as it had 2 centuries ago. "Order. We will have order." Slowly, the chamber quieted. "We are here to address the human situation," the Eternal Speaker continued. "The species we exiled has returned. They appear to have technology and capabilities that exceed our expectations. The question before us is simple. What do we do about it?" Ambassador Theklan of the Kethric Empire rose. He was ancient now, kept alive by medical technology. His shimmering skin had dulled with age, but his voice was still strong. "What we do is enforce the quarantine," he said. "Humanity was exiled for genocide. That sentence has not been lifted. If they resist, we respond with force." "Force?" The Vrex representative stood. "Did you not read the reports? They disabled one of our ships without effort. They appear and disappear at will. They have ships in systems we thought secure." "Then we negotiate," said the Deltharian ambassador. "Perhaps we can reach an understanding. Negotiate with genocidal criminals?" Theklan's voice dripped with contempt. "Is that what this council has become?" "Perhaps," a new voice said. "You should ask whether they were actually criminals." Everyone turned. Standing at the entrance to the chamber was a human woman. She wore a simple gray uniform with no weapons. Her dark hair was pulled back, and her eyes swept the room with calm confidence. "Who are you?" the Eternal Speaker demanded. "How did you enter this chamber?" "My name is Sarah Chen. I'm a diplomatic envoy from Earth, and I walked in through the front door." She smiled slightly. "Your security is quite good, but not good enough." Guards moved toward her. But the Eternal Speaker raised a hand. "Wait. Let her speak. I want to hear what humanity has to say for itself." Sarah walked down the central aisle. Her footsteps echoed in the silent chamber. She reached the center, where her predecessor had stood 200 years ago, and turned to face the assembled species. 200 years ago, she began. My great-great-grandmother stood in this spot. She begged you to examine the evidence. She begged you to let humanity prove its innocence. You refused. You voted to exile us. You sealed us away and tried to forget we existed. You were guilty. Theklan said. The evidence was clear. EC. That word. The evidence was fabricated, Sarah said calmly. And I can prove it. She touched a device on her wrist. Suddenly, every screen in the chamber lit up. Data began flowing across them. Genetic sequences, chemical analyses, communications, intercepts, financial records. Chastenwijk. This is the bioweapon that killed 3 billion Vrex colonists, Sarah said. Here is its genetic structure. Notice anything interesting? A Vrex scientist in the observation gallery stood up. Those markers, those aren't human. They're similar, but the base structure is different. Correct, Sarah said. Someone took human genetic samples and modified them to create this weapon. They made it look human enough to fool basic analysis. But deep analysis shows it's not human at all. More data appeared on the screens. Here are communications from a Kethric biological research facility, Sarah continued. Dated 6 months before the attack. They discuss project removal and the need to eliminate the human obstacle to Kethric expansion. Theklan shot to his feet. This is outrageous. These documents are clearly forged. Are they? Sarah's voice was ice. Then, explain this. A video began playing on every screen. It showed a Kethric laboratory. Scientists worked with biological samples. One of them spoke clearly to a camera. Project removal is proceeding as planned. The bioweapon will be deployed on the Vrex colonies. The genetic markers will point to humanity. The Vrex will demand justice, and the Council will have no choice but to exile the humans. With humanity gone, Kethric expansion into their territories can proceed unimpeded. The chamber erupted. Species shouted at each other. Some demanded the video be authenticated. Others were already convinced. This is a fabrication, Theklan shouted. Humanity has had 200 years to create false evidence. Then perhaps you'd like to explain this, Sarah said. And her voice cut through the chaos. The screens changed. They now showed financial records. Massive payments from Kethric accounts to Vrex officials. Payments to council members. Payments to intelligence agencies. You paid them, Sarah said, looking directly at Theklan. You paid the Vrex to blame us. You paid council members to vote for our exile. You orchestrated the entire thing. A Vrex admiral stood up in the gallery. Those account numbers. Those are real. I recognize them. He turned to the Vrex ambassador. You knew? Your government knew we were lied to? The Vrex ambassador looked pale. We received intelligence, suggesting the humans were responsible. We had no reason to doubt it. No reason, except the massive bribes you accepted, Sarah said coldly. More voices joined the chaos. Some species were demanding investigations. Others were defending the Kethric. A few were simply stunned into silence. The eternal speaker struggled to restore order. Silence. We will have silence. It took several minutes, but eventually the chamber quieted enough for the eternal speaker to speak. These are serious allegations, it said slowly. If true, they represent the greatest miscarriage of justice in galactic history. But we cannot simply accept this evidence without verification. Then verify it, Sarah said. We have the original laboratory where the bioweapon was created. It's on a Kethric world called Thexnor. Send your own investigators. See for yourselves. The planet Thexnor is a classified military research facility, Theklan said. No outsiders are permitted. How convenient, Sarah said. A military research facility that just happens to be where the bioweapon was created. And outsiders aren't allowed to see it. She turned to address the entire chamber. For 200 years, humanity has lived with the shame of a crime we didn't commit. We were cast out. Our name was destroyed. Billions of humans grew up knowing the galaxy thought them monsters. Her voice grew stronger. But we didn't let it break us. We built. We learned. We grew. And we uncovered the truth. Not because we wanted revenge. Because we wanted justice. She looked at each species representative in turn. Now you have a choice. You can continue to believe the lie. You can continue to let the guilty go unpunished. Or you can do what you should have done 200 years ago. Investigate properly. Find the truth. And make it right. Before anyone could respond, Sarah touched her wrist device again. This time, what appeared on the screens was a live video feed. It showed a Ketheric. Not just any Ketheric, but someone important. Judging by the ornate clothing, the being looked frightened. "My name is Vex Thor," the Ketheric said. I was, a senior research director for the Ketheric military. I helped develop the bioweapon used on the Vriex colonies. I did so under orders from the Expansion Council. We were told that humanity's growing influence was a threat to Ketheric dominance. We were told that removing them was necessary for our species' survival. Theclon's shimmering skin turned dark. This is coerced testimony. Humanity has clearly, "I'm on a human vessel by choice," Vex Thor interrupted. "They found me 6 months ago. They showed me what our weapon had done. 3 billion dead, including children, including innocents who had nothing to do with politics or power. I couldn't stay silent anymore." The Ketheric continued. "I'm not the only one. There are dozens of us. Scientists, administrators, officials who knew the truth. Humanity has been collecting us for years. We're all willing to testify. We're all willing to face justice for what we did." Another face appeared. A Vrex military officer. "My name is Crix. I was part of the intelligence unit that discovered the evidence against humanity. We were paid to fabricate reports. Paid to support the narrative that humans were guilty. I have documentation of every payment, every order, every lie we were told to tell." More faces appeared. More testimonies. Ketheric scientists. Vrex officials. Even a few council aides who had been involved in the conspiracy. The chamber was completely silent now. Everyone watched the screens. Watched these beings confess to their part in the greatest deception in galactic history. When the testimonies ended, Sarah spoke again. Her voice was quieter now, but somehow more powerful. "This is what humanity has been doing for 200 years. Not planning revenge. Not building weapons of conquest. We've been investigating. We've been finding the truth. We've been collecting evidence and witnesses." She paused. "We've also been building, yes. Building technologies that let us survive without you. Building ships that can move freely without your jump gates. Building an infrastructure that doesn't need galactic approval. Because we learned a lesson 200 years ago," she continued. "We learned that we can't trust others to protect us. We can't trust that justice will be served. We can only trust ourselves." Trust. Theclon had been silent during the testimonies, his skin darker and darker. Now he spoke, and his voice shook with rage. "Even if this evidence is real, even if some Ketheric officials conspired against humanity, that doesn't give you the right to threaten the galactic order. You're displaying military force. You're violating the quarantine. We're demanding justice," Sarah interrupted. "That's all. Justice for 3 billion Vrex who died in your conspiracy. Justice for humanity, who spent 2 centuries in exile for your crime. Justice. And if we refuse?" Theclon asked. Sarah's expression didn't change. "Then you'll learn exactly what 200 years of desperate innovation can accomplish. We don't want war. We don't want revenge. But we will have justice. One way or another, the Eternal Speaker looked around the chamber. The Council needs time to review this evidence, to investigate these claims. No, Sarah said simply. The time for delays is over. The evidence is before you. The witnesses are available. You can have justice now, or you can have war. Choose. You dare threaten this council? Theklan's voice was almost a scream now. I'm not threatening, Sarah said. I'm stating facts. Humanity is not the weak species you exiled. We're not asking permission anymore. We're not begging for fairness. We're telling you how this is going to work. She touched her wrist device one more time. Every screen showed the same image now. A star map. Dozens of systems were highlighted in blue. These are human colonies, Sarah said. Hidden colonies that we've built over the last 2 centuries. Each one is self-sufficient. Each one has defensive capabilities that exceed anything in the galactic fleet. We have 30 settled worlds. We have hundreds of ships. We have technologies you don't understand. She let that sink in. We're not your enemy. We never were. But we're also not your victims. Not anymore. What do you want? The Deltharian ambassador asked. She sounded genuinely curious, not hostile. The truth acknowledged, Sarah said. The Kethric officials responsible for this crime prosecuted. The Vrex officials who participated prosecuted. Reparations for humanity's 200 years of exile. And a formal apology from this council. And if we agree to these terms, the Eternal Speaker asked, then humanity will consider rejoining galactic civilization, Sarah said. Not as the species we were, not as suppliants, but as equals, as partners in building something better than what exists now. And if we don't agree? Theklan asked, though his voice had lost its confidence. Sarah smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Then we don't need you. We'll continue building our own civilization. We'll continue expanding. We'll continue advancing. And someday, maybe in another 100 years, you'll realize that the galaxy's center of power has shifted. That Earth doesn't need the Council. The Council needs Earth. She let those words hang in the air. You have 24 hours, Sarah said. After that, I'm leaving. And humanity will make its own decision about our future relationship with the galaxy. She turned and walked toward the exit. The guards didn't try to stop her this time. As she reached the door, she turned back one last time. 200 years ago, you cast us out thinking we were weak, thinking we were guilty, thinking we would disappear. You were wrong on all counts. Don't make another mistake today. Then she was gone. The chamber erupted again, louder than before. Species shouted at each other. Accusations flew. The Kethric delegation tried to defend themselves. The Vrex demanded answers from their own representatives. And in the center of it all, the Eternal Speaker stood silent, watching the order it had maintained for centuries crumble. Humanity had returned. And nothing would ever be the same. The Kethric Empire made its decision within 6 hours of Sarah Chen's ultimatum. They chose war. Admiral Thek-Nor, military commander of the Kethric Defense Force and nephew to Ambassador Theklan, ordered the immediate mobilization of the Kethric fleet. It was the second largest military force in the galaxy, with over 2,000 warships. They had been preparing for this moment since the first reports of human ships appeared. We will crush them quickly, Thek-Nor told his command staff. They have technology, yes, but they're a small species. Limited resources, limited numbers. We will overwhelm them with sheer force. The fleet assembled in the Kethric home system. Battleships the size of cities. Carriers filled with fighters. Destroyers bristling with weapons. It was the largest show of military might the galaxy had seen in a century. They plotted a course to Earth. They would go to the human homeworld and force surrender. It would take 3 weeks using the jump gate network. They made it 5 days. The first attack came as the fleet passed through the Helix Nebula, a cloud of gas and dust that made sensor readings difficult. Kethric ships relied on their powerful shields and thick armor. They didn't worry about ambushes. They should have. Human ships appeared out of nowhere. Not from jump gates. Not from wormholes. They simply materialized, as if they had been invisible, and suddenly chose to be seen. There were only 50 human vessels against 2,000 Ketheric warships. The battle lasted 17 minutes. Human weapons cut through Ketheric shields like they weren't there. Beams of pure energy sliced capital ships in half. Missiles that couldn't be intercepted found their targets with perfect accuracy, and the human ships moved impossibly fast, dodging return fire with ease. All ships, concentrate fire on Sector 7, Admiral Theknor ordered. Bring them down. 500 Ketheric ships focused their weapons on a single human vessel, enough firepower to destroy a moon. The human ship's shields absorbed every shot, and then it returned fire. A single beam lanced out and struck the Ketheric flagship's main reactor. Admiral Theknor had just enough time to see his bridge erupt in flames before everything went dark. When the battle ended, 1,600 Ketheric ships were destroyed or disabled. The remaining 400 retreated in disorder. The human fleet pursued for exactly 1 hour, destroying any ship that tried to fight. Then they stopped and broadcast a message to the survivors. Return to Ketheric space. Tell your government that this war is over. Any further attacks will result in the complete destruction of your military capability. We're not interested in occupation. We're not interested in revenge. We're interested in justice. Surrender the officials responsible for the genocide. Face the truth, or face extinction. Choose. The message ended. The human ships vanished again. In the Galactic Council chambers, representatives watched footage of the battle in stunned silence. A Zolari military analyst stood at a podium, reviewing the tactical data. In 17 minutes, she said, her voice shaking slightly, humanity destroyed or disabled 80% of the Ketheric fleet. They did this with minimal forces and suffered 0 casualties. Their technology advantage is not marginal. It's absolute. The Eternal Speaker looked around the chamber. Does anyone still doubt humanity's capability? No one spoke. Then perhaps we should discuss their demands more seriously. But even as the council debated, the Ketheric Empire was making another decision. They refused to surrender. Instead, they called upon their client species and allies. The Vrex, still angry about the revelations of bribery, refused. The Deltharians refused. One by one, species that the Ketheric thought they could count on turned away. Only 3 smaller species agreed to join the Ketheric. Together, they assembled another fleet. Smaller than the first, but still formidable. 1,000 ships. They plotted a course to the nearest known human colony, a world called New Earth. They never arrived. Human ships intercepted them at the edge of the system. This time, there was no battle. The human fleet simply surrounded the Ketheric force and waited. A communication came from the lead human vessel. Captain James O'Coffer's voice was calm and professional. Ketheric vessels, you are entering human territory. We are authorized to use lethal force to defend our worlds, but we'd prefer not to. Power down your weapons. Accept inspection, and we'll escort you back to your space unharmed. The Ketheric commander, a young and ambitious officer named Kexlon, refused. We do not take orders from criminals and exiles. Your choice, James said. What happened next became known as the demonstration. The human ships didn't fire their weapons. Instead, they activated a new technology that no one had seen before. Every Ketheric ship suddenly lost power. Not just engines or weapons. Everything. Life support, communications, even emergency systems. The ships became lifeless hulls, floating in space. Then, one by one, the human ships approached each Ketheric vessel. They attached docking clamps and began transferring the crews to cargo bays. When a ship was empty, the humans placed a small device on its hull and moved to the next vessel. It took 6 hours to evacuate all 1,000 ships. When the last crew member was secured in human cargo bays, James broadcast one final message to the Kethric government. Your people are safe. They'll be returned unharmed. But your ships are forfeit. The small device is activated. All 1,000 Kethric warships simply dissolved. Their atomic structure broke down into component elements that scattered into space like dust. This is what we can do, James said. We can destroy your fleets without killing anyone. We can take apart your ships at the molecular level. We can control your technology. We can do all of this while showing mercy to your people. Now imagine what we could do if we stopped being merciful. The Kethric crews were returned home a week later, delivered by human ships that appeared in orbit of the Kethric homeworld. The crews were healthy, well-fed, and utterly terrified. They told stories of human ships that could appear anywhere, of technologies that could do impossible things, of humans who treated them with respect and kindness, even while demonstrating overwhelming power. The Kethric Empire's will to fight crumbled. 3 weeks after the war began, the Kethric government requested negotiations. Not surrender talks. Negotiations. They still had pride. Sarah Chen met with Kethric representatives on a neutral station. She sat across from Ambassador Theklan, who looked older and more tired than before. You've made your point, Theklan said bitterly. The same thing I wanted 3 weeks ago, Sarah said calmly. Justice. She placed a data pad on the table between them. Here is a list of Kethric officials who were directly involved in the conspiracy. Starting with you. End quote. Sunray. Scifi. Scifi. End quote. Theklan stared at the pad but didn't touch it. If we surrender these people, we admit guilt. We admit that the Kethric Empire committed genocide. You did commit genocide, Sarah said. 3 billion Vrex died because of your conspiracy. Humanity spent 200 years in exile because of your lies. Yes, you're guilty. The only question is whether you'll face that guilt with honor or continue hiding from it. And if we refuse? Sarah leaned back. Then we continue. We'll blockade your worlds. We'll intercept your ships. We won't kill your people, but we'll make it impossible for your empire to function. Slowly, your economy will collapse, your government will fall, and eventually, someone else will come to power who's willing to face the truth. She paused. Or you can do the right thing now. Save your people years of suffering. Accept justice, and begin rebuilding your reputation. Theklan was silent for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. If I agree to this, if I turn myself in, what happens to the Kethric Empire? That's up to you, Sarah said. We're not interested in conquest. We're not interested in humiliation. We just want the truth acknowledged and the guilty punished. The Kethric people aren't responsible for what their leaders did. They deserve a chance to move forward. Theklan looked at her with something that might have been respect. Because we remember what it's like to be wrongly accused, Sarah said quietly. We remember what it's like to be judged for crimes we didn't commit. The Kethric people didn't create the bioweapon. They didn't frame humanity. A small group of officials did that. Those officials should pay. Not millions of innocent civilians. She stood. You have 48 hours. After that, the blockade begins. 36 hours later, Ambassador Theklan and 42 other Kethric officials surrendered themselves to human custody. They were transported to a tribunal that had been established on a neutral world. The trials took 3 months. Human lawyers presented evidence. Kethric lawyers tried to defend their clients. Judges from 7 different species, including humans, reviewed everything. In the end, 37 officials were found guilty of genocide, conspiracy, and crimes against sapient beings. They were sentenced to life imprisonment. 5 were found guilty of lesser crimes and received shorter sentences. Ambassador Theklan, as the conspiracy's architect, received the longest sentence. As human guards led him away, he looked back at Sarah Chen. You won, he said. Are you satisfied? No, Sarah said honestly. 3 billion beings are still dead. Humanity still lost 200 years. But justice has been served. That's something. With the Ketheric officials in custody, the Galactic Council had no choice but to act. They convened a special session to address humanity's demands. The Eternal Speaker stood before the assembled representatives and did something that being had never done before. It apologized. 200 years ago, this council made a grave error. We rushed to judgment. We ignored evidence. We cast out an innocent species because we believed lies. For this, we offer our deepest apology to humanity. The words were broadcast across the galaxy. Billions of beings heard them. Furthermore, the Eternal Speaker continued. We recognize that the old council structure failed. It allowed corruption. It allowed injustice. Therefore, we are dissolving this council. Shock rippled through the chamber. In its place, we propose a new organization, one with transparent laws, one with independent oversight, one that cannot be swayed by bribes or politics. We invite humanity to help us build this new galactic community. Sarah Chen stood to respond. She had been elected by Earth's government to speak for humanity. We accept the apology, she said, but we have conditions for joining any new galactic organization. She outlined humanity's requirements. True equality for all species, evidence-based justice, independent courts, shared technology, protections against the kind of corruption that had destroyed the old council. Some species agreed immediately. Others hesitated. A few refused outright. That's fine, Sarah said. Humanity is not demanding universal agreement. We're offering a choice. Join the new system or don't. But those who join will have access to human technology, to human markets, to human friendship. Those who don't join are welcome to maintain the old ways. We won't interfere. We won't attack. We'll simply build something better beside you. It was a bold strategy. Instead of forcing change, humanity offered an alternative. Within a year, 23 species had joined what was now called the Free Species Compact. The organization established its headquarters on a neutral station, newly built using both human and alien technology. The old Galactic Council still existed, but it was a shadow of its former self. Only 12 species remained loyal to it. And even they were reconsidering. The galaxy's power structure had fundamentally shifted. Earth was no longer a supplicant. It was a leader. And humanity's principles of justice and equality were spreading. On Earth, in the Capitol building, a ceremony was held. President Amara Lin stood beside a very special guest, Sarah Chen, the elder. At 237 years old, she had lived to see everything. The exile, the long silence, the return, the war, and now, the victory. She looked frail, her body finally giving out despite the best medical technology. But her eyes were still sharp. Was it worth it? President Lin asked quietly. 200 years of isolation. All that suffering. The old woman smiled. Ask our children. Ask the humans living on 30 worlds. Ask the species that now have a voice in galactic affairs, because we showed them a better way. She squeezed the president's hand. We were cast out thinking we were weak. We were exiled for a crime we didn't commit. But we survived. We built something remarkable. And we used that strength, not for revenge, but for justice. Yes, she said, her voice growing weaker. It was worth it. That night, Sarah Chen died peacefully in her sleep. Her great-great-great-granddaughter, also named Sarah, and also a diplomat, stood at the funeral and spoke to the gathered crowd. My ancestor lived through humanity's darkest hour. She saw us cast out. She saw us labeled as monsters. But she never stopped believing in justice. Never stopped working toward the truth. Because of her generation's sacrifice, because of their 2 centuries of patience and effort, we stand here today not as exiles, but as leaders. Not as criminals, but as proof that justice eventually prevails. She looked up at the stars. The galaxy tried to break humanity. Instead, they forged something stronger, something better, something that will last for millennia. 10 years after the war, the Free Species Compact held its annual assembly. Representatives from 47 species attended. More species were applying to join every month. Ambassador Sarah Chen, the younger, stood at the podium where her ancestor had once demanded justice. Now, she was proposing new initiatives. Shared research projects, cultural exchanges, joint exploration missions. The galaxy was changing. Old rivalries were fading. New partnerships were forming. And at the center of it all was humanity, not dominating, but leading by example. In the old galactic council chambers, now mostly empty, the eternal speaker sat alone. The being looked at the empty seats and thought about everything that had happened. They had cast humanity out thinking it would solve a problem. Instead, they had created something they could never have imagined. A species tempered by injustice, strengthened by isolation, and ultimately victorious through patience and wisdom. The eternal speaker had lived for 1,000 years. It had seen empires rise and fall, but it had never seen anything like humanity. They had been cast out. They had built a hidden empire, and they had changed everything. The galaxy would never be the same again. And perhaps, the eternal speaker thought, that was exactly what the galaxy needed. In the darkness between stars, human ships continued their work, exploring new systems, building new colonies, helping species that had joined the compact develop their own technologies. Humanity had learned a bitter lesson 200 years ago. That justice delayed is not justice denied. That strength built in silence can speak louder than any weapon. That mercy shown to enemies can build stronger peace than any treaty. The galaxy had cast them out, thinking them weak. They had returned stronger than anyone imagined. And in doing so, they had shown every species in the galaxy a simple truth. When you force the innocent to stand alone, you don't break them. You teach them to stand forever.